The year 1966. The location, beautiful Glenelg Beach, Adelaide, South Australia. Another exceptionally hot summer saw thousands flocking to the beach. And the same was true for Jane, Anna and Grant Beaumont. With bus fare and money to buy an ice cream, the three young siblings set out for a fun summer holiday day by the ocean. They were never to be seen again. But before we go down yet another Australia Day rabbit hole, I would like to introduce myself if you've never been here before. I'm Andrea.M. and this is Missing Down Under. And I would like to ask all of you again to please repeatedly harass the like button, chloroform and hypnotise the subscribe button and obsessively ring its bell, and spam your friends by sharing and start a conversation in the comments section below if you have any theories, or you would just like to talk about today's case, or maybe you remember your parents or your grandparents talking about it. I'd love to know what you think. And because without help from all of you good folk, it would be impossible for me to continue to grow my channel and make more compelling content for you all just like this. With that out of the way, and if you're sitting comfortably, we may begin. Glenelg is a beachside suburb of the South Australian capital of Adelaide. Located on the shore of Holdfast Bay in the Gulf of St Vincent, it has become a tourist destination due to its beach and many attractions. Home to several hotels and dozens of restaurants, Glenelg also boasts a swim-up bar, a boardwalk and jetty, and at the time of the disappearance of the children it also had an amusement park. It has boutique hotels and shopping precincts. However, there is one tragic event that took place in 1966 that put Glenelg on the national and international map. The eerie and still unexplained disappearance of the three Beaumont children. The eldest daughter Jane Natar Beaumont, age 9, her younger sister Anna Kathleen, age 7, and the baby of the family, little Grant Ellis Beaumont, aged 4. Jane, Anna and Grant Beaumont lived with their parents, Grant Jim Beaumont, a former serviceman and driver for suburban taxis, and Nancy Beaumont, who had married in December 1955. The house was at 109 Harding Street, Somerton Park, a suburb of Adelaide, South Australia, not far from Glenelg Beach. And Glenelg Beach was a popular spot that the children and many others at the height of the surf music era often visited. On the 25th of January, in the midst of yet another summer heat wave, and it seems to me that a lot of really bad stuff goes on when the weather's doing extreme things. It's almost as if it brings out the worst in these perpetrators that, you know, they're either a serial killer or they're an abductor or whatever. It just seems to heighten all of that kind of behaviour. It's very strange. I'm not sure if it has something to do with their brain chemistry or the heat just gets to them. But as I've been researching a lot of these cases, I've seen a lot of parallels with extreme weather events. You have a cyclone, or you have a rain event, or you have a heat wave or an outbreak of storms, and the crime rate just seems to go through the roof. Just something I've noted. So it's Australia Day again coming up, and the day before Australia Day, in the midst of the summer heat wave, Jim would drop the children at Glenelg Beach before heading off on a 3-day sales trip to Snowtown. And when I read that, I was like, oh, because if you're familiar with Snowtown, you'll be familiar with what happened at Snowtown in later years. And if you don't know what happened at Snowtown or what Snowtown is, please stay tuned to my Real Crime Down Under series. I will be covering Snowtown in a future video, so stay tuned for that. So then we go to the morning of the 26th of January 1996, which again is Australia Day. The children asked their mother to visit Glenelg Beach again, and as it was too hot to walk, they took a 5-minute 3-kilometre bus journey from their home to the beach. So a lot of people would probably be thinking, well, why did their mother let them go alone? Well, this was why. They were only 3 kilometres from home. It was literally 5 minutes, and they only caught the bus because it was too hot for them to walk in the summer heat wave that was going on. And their mother would have felt safe allowing them to do so because it was so close to home. And you have to remember it was 1966. And as explored with our last Real Crime Down Under case, in that era people felt very safe about keeping doors unlocked, allowing their children to just, roam around and be kids, because it wasn't common for people to just disappear or for people to be going around being a serial killer at night. It wasn't as common or as well known back then, so people had this false sense of safety. And that was all that Mrs. Beaumont did. She was like, okay, my kids are hot, I'm going to send them to the beach. And she was expecting them to be home on the 12 noon bus, the 2 p.m. bus at the latest. So they caught the bus at 8:45, and Nancy did start to become worried, however, when they did not return on either the 12 p.m. or the 2 p.m. bus. And that night, Jim would return home early from his trip at around 3 o'clock, and he immediately drove down to the crowded beach. Like, he thought, oh, well, maybe they just lost track of time, they've been having fun. But he was also unable to locate his children. He then returned to the house to pick up their mother, and they searched the streets, they visited friends' houses. By 5:30 p.m, there was still no sign of the children, so they went to the Glenelg police station to report the disappearance. Police quickly organised a search of the Glenelg beach and adjacent areas based on the assumption that the children were nearby, and as we explored a second ago, had simply lost track of time. I mean, they're kids, they're having fun. Or they could have even been supposed by some of them, they're kids, they've got their little brother with them, he's only 4, maybe they've let him lay down for a nap and they're watching over him before they bring him home. So much would have been going on in these people's minds at the time, and I really think that they just thought everything was fine because of the era and because it was such a highly populated beach. There would have been tons of witnesses because the beach was packed this day. And I think that the suppositions would have been pretty innocent at this time. The search then began in earnest and was expanded to the sandhills, the ocean, the nearby buildings and the airport rail lines, and the interstate roads were being monitored as well. And this was based by then on the fear that there could have been an accident or a kidnapping. Within 24 hours, the entire nation was aware of the case. Within 3 days, on the 29th of January, the Adelaide Mail led with a headline of "Sex Crime Now Feared," highlighting the rapidly evolving fear that they had been abducted and perhaps murdered by a sex offender. Despite this, the initial reward offered was only £250. Back then, that was a lot of money, but today it'd probably be like $25, not much at all. The Patawalonga boat haven was drained on the 29th of January after a woman told police she had spoken with 3 children who were similar in description to the 3 missing Beaumont children near the haven at 7 p.m. on the 26th of January. 40 police cadets and members of the emergency operations group searched the area, but nothing was found. So then we now move on to prime suspects that may have been involved with the children going missing. So police investigating the case found several witnesses who had said they had seen the children in Collie Reserve near Glenelg Beach in the company of a tall man with fair to light brown hair, a thin face, and in his mid-30s, and he had a suntan complexion and a thin to athletic build and was wearing swim trunks. And it was said that the children were actually playing with this guy and they appeared to be relaxed and enjoying themselves, almost like they knew him, and perhaps they did. The man also approached one of the witnesses asking had anyone been near the children's belongings as their money was missing. So this man then goes off to change while the children wait for him, and the group were then seen walking away together from the beach sometime later, which the police estimate to be around 12:15 p.m. or so. And the Beaumont parents would go on to describe their children, particularly the eldest Jane, as shy, and for them to be playing so confidently with a stranger seemed extremely out of character for them. Investigators theorised that the children had perhaps met the man during a previous visit and had grown to trust him, which gets into the very icky area of maybe this guy had been at the beach over a few days grooming the children and gaining their trust so that he could then abduct them, for which purposes we still don't know. I'm the eternal optimist here, so I'm really hoping it was just maybe the work of a couple that had lost children and decided, well, there's 3 here we could take. And I always hope that the Beaumont children were just taken away and were given a new family, maybe told a few lies to put them into this new family. But still, we'll never know because they've never been found. And this, I can't even imagine. A chance remark at home, which seemed insignificant at the time, supports the theory. Anna had told her mother that Jane had got a boyfriend down at the beach. So I guess that puts to pay the theory it was just an innocent, let's just take these kids because we can't have kids of our own theory. It's into icky territory again. Nancy thought she meant a playmate and took no further notice until the disappearance. But we still don't know that she actually meant this older guy. It could have been a young boy that had a little bit of a crush on Jane. Still, we don't know. A shopkeeper at nearby Wenzel's Bakery also reported Jane had bought pastries and a meat pie with a £1 note. Police viewed this as further evidence that the children had been with another person for 2 reasons. The shopkeeper knew the children well from previous visits and reported that they had never purchased a meat pie before, and their mother had only given them 6 shillings and sixpence, enough for their bus fare and lunch, maybe an ice cream, and not £1. Police believed the money had been given to them by someone else, which probably was this so-called guy that they had been seen with. According to an initial statement, the Beaumont children were seen walking alone at about 3 p.m, away from the beach along Jetty Road in the general direction of their house. The witness, a postman, knew the children well, and yeah, you would have to trust the witness if he was a postman because he'd know everybody in the area. And back then, like even true for me, growing up in the 80s and 90s, if the postie was around, you'd go over and you'd say hello to him. So the kids were probably like that, especially back in the 60s. They may have even walked out to greet the postman and take the mail in for their mother, because it's just to do things like that back then. So this witness, the postman, knew the children well, and his statement was regarded as reliable. He said the children were holding hands and laughing in the main street, didn't seem to be troubled at all, weren't afraid of anything, they were just walking home like they always would do. So police could not determine why the reliable children were already an hour late and were strolling home seemingly unconcerned. But again, you have to remember, they're kids. They wouldn't have had a watch on them probably, or maybe they did. It's just hard to really understand how they knew when to go back and get the bus and, what time it was. So maybe they didn't have a watch, maybe they did. That's never actually been made clear. So this was the last confirmed sighting of the Beaumont children. The postman contacted the police 2 days after his initial statement and said he thought that he saw them in the morning, not the afternoon, as he'd previously said. So it kind of also makes me wonder. He's the postman. He would not have been delivering the post on this day. He would have been on holiday because it was Australia Day. It was a public holiday, so maybe he had a couple of drinks down at the beach, hot day. We all know what happens. It's a hot day, you're drinking at the beach. Who knows? Just putting that out there. They said he was a reliable witness, but then he couldn't remember what time it was that he had seen the children. But why would they have been walking home in the morning? They'd only just gotten to the beach. They wouldn't have been coming home, and then they were seen at the beach earlier. So that's kind of a muddy area with the postman too. He was thought of as reliable. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he took the children. Still, we'll never know. Just theories. A local resident, Miss Daphne Gregory, reported sighting the children at 3 o'clock with a man who was carrying an airline's bag, similar to the one owned by Jane Beaumont. Several months later, a woman reported that on the night of the disappearance, a man accompanied by 2 girls and a boy entered a neighbouring house that she believed to have been empty. Later, the woman said she had seen the boy walking alone along a lane where he was pursued and roughly caught by the man. The next morning, the house appeared to be deserted again, and she saw neither the man nor the children ever again. Police could not establish why she had failed to provide this information earlier. Other reported sightings of the children continued for about a year after their disappearance. So there's a lot of conflicting stories. There's the postman, there's this lady, there's all these different sightings of the children with this guy who nobody can identify, nobody knows who he is. So the family and the police are becoming extremely desperate at this stage, and it is after this when the Beaumont case begins to gain international attention that on the 8th of November 1966, Gerard Croiset, a Dutch psychic, was brought to Australia to assist in the search, causing a media frenzy. Croiset's efforts, however you pronounce his name, proved to be unsuccessful, with his story changing day to day and offering no clues. He identified a spot at a warehouse near the children's home in which he believed their bodies had been buried, inside the remains of an old brick kiln. So the property owners, who were reluctant to excavate based only on a psychic's claim, soon bowed to public pressure after publicity helped raise $40,000 to have the building demolished. No remains nor any evidence linking anything to any of the Beaumont family was ever found in this location. In 1966, the building identified by Croiset was undergoing partial demolition, and the owners allowed for a full search of the site. Once again, no trace of the children, as we just said, was ever found. And this is where the cruelness of human nature comes into the case. Hoax letters began coming in. About 2 years after the disappearance, the Beaumont parents received 2 letters. One was supposedly written by Jane, and another by a man who said he was keeping the children. The envelopes showed a postmark of Dandenong, Victoria. The brief notes described a relatively pleasant existence and referred to the man who was keeping them. Police believed at the time that the letters could quite likely have been authentic after comparing them with others written by Jane. The letter from the man said that he had appointed himself the guardian of the children and was willing to hand them back to their parents. In the letter, a meeting place was nominated. So the Beaumont parents, followed by a detective, drove to the designated place, but nobody appeared. It was sometime later a third letter arrived, also purported to be from Jane, stating that the man had realised a disguised detective was present and decided to keep the children because the Beaumonts had betrayed his trust. There were no further letters. In 1992, new forensic examination of the letters showed they were a hoax. Fingerprint technology had improved, and the author was identified as a 41-year-old man who had been a teenager at the time and had written the letters as a joke. What the F? Seriously. I mean, I know he was a teenager at the time, but my God, you're old enough by then to know better. And because of the time that had elapsed, he was not charged with any offence. And there really wasn't anything they could charge him with. He simply wrote a letter. But oh my God, that is just so incredibly cruel. This is just another one of those situations I have absolutely no words for. Here's his grieving family. They have lost all of their children. They don't know where they are, if they're still alive, if they're not still alive. They've got no closure. And here's this idiot writes them a letter saying, oh, I've got your children. I'm going to bring them back. And then they find out It was a teenager, and he did it for a joke. I'm sorry, dude, but if you're watching this, that was lame in the extreme. Oh, my goodness. So, later developments. In November of 2013, excavation was initiated in the back of a North Plimpton factory that had previously belonged to one of the possible suspects in the case, Harry Phipps. Further excavation at a slightly different location on the site was undertaken in February of 2018, but nothing relevant was found. The excavations were based on two men reporting that as boys, they had been paid to dig a hole in that area at around the same time the children had gone missing, and also based on geophysical testing which had identified an anomaly in the disturbed soil. Animal bones were found, but nothing was found in relation to the Beaumont children. So possibly somebody had asked these boys to dig the hole. Maybe they had a big dog that they needed to bury. Who knows? Now we move on to some of the suspects that the police were looking at the time of the disappearance. And we start with Bevan Spencer von Einem. Bevan Spencer von Einem, born in 1946, was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1984 for murdering 15-year-old Richard Kelvin, son of the Adelaide newsreader Rob Kelvin. Police and prosecutors publicly stated that they believed von Einem had accomplices and was possibly involved in additional murders. About this same time, police began to suspect von Einem of possible involvement in the Beaumont case. No accomplices were ever charged. Von Einem has refused to cooperate with investigators about his possible connection to the murders and other murders. During the investigation into von Einem, police heard from an informant identified only as Mr. B. He related an alleged conversation in which von Einem boasted of having taken 3 children from a beach several years earlier. He said he had taken them home to conduct experiments. Just, no. Okay, I can't even believe I'm about to say this, so if you're really sensitive, just pause, look away now. Von Einem had said that he performed brilliant surgery on each of them and connected them up. I don't even want to know what that means. One of the children had supposedly died during the procedure, and so he had killed the other 2 and dumped all the bodies in bushland south of Adelaide. Police had not previously considered von Einem in connection with the Beaumont children, but he somewhat resembled the descriptions and the identikits from 1966. According to Adelaide Police Detective Bob O'Brien, Mr. B gave important information during the investigation into the Kelvin murder and was regarded as a generally reliable source. However, police reception of the alleged conversation was mixed. There were enough plausible details to warrant further research, yet other details relayed by Mr. B did not fit with known facts and were regarded with scepticism by the police. As of 2014, von Einem had not been ruled out as a suspect. While von Einem was known to have frequented Glenelg Beach, oh God, this guy's icky, to perv on the changing rooms and was described as preoccupied with children. Oh my lord. Oh my God. What argues against his involvement in the Beaumont case is that he was younger than the suspect seen with the children in 1966. The suspect was reported to be in his mid to late 30s, whereas von Einem was 20 or 21 at the time. He was much younger than the suspect that had been witnessed with the kids. Another important distinction is that he was convicted of murdering a 15-year-old boy and suspected of killing males in their teens and 20s, victims that were much older than the Beaumont children. Such disparities amongst victims of a serial killer are not unheard of, but they are unusual. The reference to the surgical experimentation von Einem had purportedly made to Mr. B also corresponds to the coroner's reports on several of the murdered youths. Von Einem also told witnesses that he had taken 2 girls from the Adelaide Oval during a football match, as Ratcliffe and Gordon, two other victims of his, had been. He said he had killed them but did not elaborate. The case of the Beaumont children and of the Adelaide Oval abductions remain officially open. However, von Einem matched the police sketches of the suspect in both the Beaumont and Oval cases, and in 1989 he was identified as a suspect in a confidential police report. In August 2007, it was reported that police were examining archival footage from the original Beaumont search shot by Channel 7, which shows a young man resembling von Einem among the onlookers. The report said that police were calling for information to establish the man's identity. So then we move on to yet another possible subject, and there are a few in this case. Arthur Stanley Brown. Arthur Stanley Brown, born in 1912, was charged in 1998 with the murders of sisters Judith and Susan Mackay in Townsville, Queensland. They had disappeared on their way to school on August 26, 1970, and their bodies were found several days later in a dry creek bed. Both girls had been strangled. Brown's July 2000 trial was delayed after his lawyer applied for a Section 613 verdict unfit to be tried from the jury. He was never retried as he was found to have dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and Brown would go on to die of this disease in 2002. Along with von Einem, Brown is considered to be the most likely suspect for the Beaumont abduction, as he bore a striking similarity to the identical picture of the suspect for both the Beaumont and the Oval cases. A search for a connection to the Beaumonts was unsuccessful. No employment records existed that could shed light on Brown's movements at the time. Some of the records were believed lost in the 1974 Brisbane flood. It is also possible that Brown, who had unrestricted access to government buildings, may have even destroyed the files on his own. Although there is no proof of this, and there's no proof that he had ever visited Adelaide, a witness recalled having a conversation with Brown in which he mentioned having seen the Adelaide Festival Centre nearing completion, which would have placed him in the city shortly before the Oval abduction on the 25th of August 1973. However, no evidence has ever been found to connect Brown with Adelaide in 1966. Also, Brown was 53 at the time of the Beaumont disappearance, which doesn't match the description of the suspect seen with the children, who was reported again as being in his mid-30s. So then we cross over to yet another suspect, a man named James Ryan O'Neill. James O'Neill, born in 1947, who in 1975 was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania, is reported to have previously told a Kimberley station owner and several other acquaintances that he was responsible for the Beaumont disappearances. In 2006, O'Neill lost an injunction in the High Court of Australia to stop the broadcast of an ABC documentary, The Fisherman, which attempted to link him to the Beaumont case. Former Victorian Detective Gordon Davey spent 3 years speaking to O'Neill to win his confidence before filming him for this documentary. Davey said that although there was no evidence to link O'Neill to the Beaumonts, he was persuaded that O'Neill was to blame. I asked him about the Beaumonts and he said, "I couldn't have done it. I was in Melbourne at that time." That is not a denial. Later asked again if he had murdered the children, O'Neill replied, "Look, on legal advice, I am not going to say where I was or when I was at the time." Although O'Neill claims never to have visited Adelaide, his work in the opal industry at the time required that he frequently visit Coober Pedy, which would have required him to pass through Adelaide. Davey also suspected O'Neill was involved in the Adelaide Oval abductions. The South Australia Police have interviewed O'Neill and have discounted him as a suspect in the Beaumont case. So many suspects. There's so many people saying they were involved. And that leads us to yet another suspect, a man named Ernest Percy. Derek Percy, born in 1948, a convicted child killer and Victoria's then longest-serving prisoner, was suggested in a 2007 article in Melbourne's The Age as a suspect in the Beaumont case. The Age alleged that evidence gathered by cold case investigators indicated that Percy was a likely suspect for a number of unsolved child murders, including the Beaumont children. His insanity plea in 1969 in the murder of Yvonne Toohey was at least partly based on his suffering a psychological condition that could prevent him from remembering the details of his actions. He was supposed to have indicated that he believed he might have killed the Beaumont children, as he was in the area at the time, but he had no recollection of actually doing so. On the 30th of August 2007, Victoria Police successfully applied for the permission to question Percy in relation to the Beaumont case. In 1966, Percy was aged 17 and therefore seems to be too young to have been the man seen with the children by several witnesses. It is also unknown whether Percy would have had a car at that time, while the Beaumont suspect is presumed by commentators to have had access to one for facilitating a quick getaway, and you have to think there's 3 children with him, so he would need to get away quickly with these children. Also, for disposing of their bodies later, he would need a car. Percy was in prison from 1969 until his death in 2013, which means that he could not have been the suspect in the Adelaide Oval abductions, who many investigators believe to be connected to the disappearance of the Beaumont children. So now we move on to yet another suspect in the case, Alan Maxwell McIntyre, who died in 2017. He had himself been investigated by police and cleared of involvement in the Beaumont case, and he gave a second-hand account to the Adelaide Advisor that a man he had known in 1966, who by 2015 was being sought in Southeast Asia in connection with child abuse incidents there, had come to his home with the children's bodies in the boot of his car. McIntyre's children said they and their father initially took Anna's body for that of a boy because of her short haircut. Oh my God, his children saw that? I'm really hoping he's lying, because if his children saw that, that is horrible. How are they supposed to grow up normally after this? The man in question was later identified as businessman Alan Anthony Munro, aged 75 in 2017, a former scoutmaster who had pleaded guilty to 10 child sex offences dating back to 1962. For these crimes, he was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 5 years and 5 months, making him eligible for release in 2022. In June 2017, Adelaide detectives were given a copy of a child's diary written in 1966, which placed Munro in the vicinity of Glenelg Beach at the time of the Beaumont disappearance. He was convicted of abusing several children, including one of McIntyre's sons, who was a contributor to the diary. Munro had previously been investigated by police, but no evidence had been found that he was involved with the Beaumont case, which brings us to our final suspect, Harry Phipps. Harry Phipps died in 2004. He was a local factory owner and a then member of Adelaide's social elite. He came to attention as a possible suspect after the publication of the book The Satin Man, uncovering the mystery of the missing Beaumont children in 2013. The book did not name the identity of the Satin Man, but Phipps's estranged son Hayden named him soon after the book's publication. Phipps bore a substantial likeness to the identikit of the man seen talking to the Beaumont children at Glenelg Beach. He was wealthy and known to be in the habit of giving out £1 notes, and was later alleged to have been a paedophile. Tendencies, and lived only 300 metres away from the beach on the corner of Augusta and Sussex Street. Hayden, who was aged 15 at the time of the disappearance, came forward to researchers in 2007 with the claim that he had seen the children in his father's yard that day. Two other persons, youths at the time, said they had been paid by Phipps to dig a 2 by 1 by 2 metre hole in his factory yard that weekend for unstated reasons. And back then, if somebody older, and especially somebody who was rich and dignified, asked you to do a job, you just did it. You didn't ask them why. In November 2013, a 1 metre squared section of the factory in North Plimpton, which had been owned by Phipps, was excavated. A ground-penetrating radar found one small anomaly which can indicate movement or objects within the soil. But the dig found no additional evidence and investigations into the site were closed. 22nd of January 2018, Adelaide detectives announced that they would return to the factory site and conduct further excavations after a private investigation sponsored by Channel 7 Adelaide. The excavation on the 2nd of February 2018 took 9 hours. Animal bones and general rubbish were found, but nothing related to the Beaumont case. So now we move to possible related cases and the legacy that this leaves. So the Beaumont case resulted in one of the largest police investigations in the Australian criminal history and remains one of Australia's most infamous cold cases even after many decades. However, the case is still open and the police are still looking into it. In January 2018, the Premier of South Australia, Jay Weatherill, said that South Australian police had never given up on the case and that they have a policy that no murder investigation ends up in a closed file. The state government also continues to maintain a $1 million reward for information relating to the children's disappearance. The kidnapping is also viewed by many social commentators as a significant event in the evolution of Australian society, with a large number of people changing the way they supervise their children daily. At the time, it was never publicly suggested that the children should not have been allowed to travel unsupervised or that their parents were in any way negligent simply because contemporary Australian society took it for granted that it was safe and acceptable. And back then it was. But, kids weren't getting grabbed left and right. So, and you have to remember, they were only 5 minutes from their house. However, this case, alongside similar related child crimes such as the 1960 Graham Thorne kidnapping and the 1965 Wanda Beach murders, marked an end of innocence in post-war Australian life. The regular and widespread attention given to this case is significant in Australian criminal history, and the fact that the mystery of the disappearance has never been explained have led to the story being continually revisited by the media, and I guess here by me on YouTube. New leads and clues are regularly reported to the media, and the case still regularly headlines print and broadcast media more than half a century on. So, what happened to the parents of the Beaumont children following all of this? At the time of the investigation, the Beaumont parents received widespread sympathy from the Australian public. They remained at their Somerton Park home. Nancy, in particular, held hope that the children would return and stated in interviews that it would be dreadful if the children returned home and could not find their parents waiting for them. Over the years, as new leads and new theories emerged, the Beaumonts cooperated fully in exploring every possibility, whether it was claims that children had been abducted by a religious cult and were living variously in New Zealand, Melbourne or Tasmania, or some clue that suggested a possible burial site for the children. They were devastated in 1990 when newspapers published computer-generated photographs of how the children would have looked as adults. The pictures were published against their wishes and caused a huge wave of sympathy from a community which is still sensitive to their pain. The couple later divorced and lived separately, having resolved to live their final years away from the public attention that had followed them for decades. They sold their home, and while the case remains open, the South Australian Police remained informed of the couple's new addresses. The Beaumonts were reported to have accepted the truth of their children's disappearances may never be discovered. Nancy Beaumont would die in Adelaide on the 16th of September 2019 in a nursing home. She was then aged 92. Whereas Jim, also aged in his 90s, continues to reside in Adelaide. Nancy went to her grave not knowing where her children are, what happened to them, no closure, no way to put the case to rest, no way to say goodbye to her 3 beautiful children. And she died in a nursing home. She wasn't even at home with her husband because they just couldn't take any more of the publicity. And I can't even imagine what that would be like because, you have to think the children were only very young. The oldest was 9. So they were a relatively young married couple still when the children went missing. And that would have been just such a huge burden to bear, and to be even though the public were very supportive of the Beaumonts, and thank goodness they were, that was still a very public tragedy to have happen, and to be living your life in a fishbowl for so long, and just living every day with the hope that maybe your children would come home because you don't know what happened to them. And as I've said before on this channel, that makes me very sad when I'm presenting these cases. But we present these cases because we just... well, for me anyway, I hope it helps to jog somebody's memory, or it might just make somebody say, okay, I've put these people through enough, I'm going to tell people what happened, or yeah, I know what happened to them, maybe it's time to talk, who knows. That's just a hope that I have. So as we've said before, if you have any information that can aid the police in solving the mystery of the missing Beaumont children, please call Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000. At the time the children went missing, the eldest was Jane, and she was 9, and she had brown hair, cut short, and brown eyes. Her younger sister Anna was 7 at the time, also with a similar haircut to Jane. Her hair was a slightly lighter colour. I'm not sure what eye colour she had. And they were travelling with their youngest sibling, Grant, who was only 4 at the time, and also had a short haircut with another shade of brown hair. If you know anything, please call Crime Stoppers, as I said before, 1800 333 000. And that brings us to the end of today's case of the missing Beaumont children. This has been a case that was talked about a lot when I was a kid, and I remember when we were being taught stranger danger in school, that our teacher was actually telling us about the girls that had been abducted from Adelaide Oval, and how the man had gotten them into a car, and because the children were actually found dead, like the teachers couldn't really tell us what they said, but I guess just to get it through to us. And it chilled me to the bone back then, and I was like 5 when I heard this story. And our teacher was saying, the girls got in the car with this man, and he was going to drive them home. And they said, they started to notice that he wasn't taking them the right way. And they're like, no, this is the wrong way. You're not taking us the right way. And then the children were found dead. So that was used, and so were the Beaumonts, were used when we were children. And I'm from New South Wales. I've always lived in New South Wales. I've never lived anywhere else, not in any other states in Australia. This happened over in South Australia in Adelaide, and this was in like the 80s and the 90s that we were told this, and it was still relevant then. It was like, don't talk to strangers, don't get in cars and things with people you don't know, don't accept gifts and things from strangers, you'll end up like the Beaumont children. And that was drummed into us at school, even though many years later and in a different state. So I can remember hearing about the Beaumont children from a very young age, and whenever there was anything like on Crime Investigation Australia, or there was a news report or a special report about the Beaumonts, I always tuned in, because as I said before, I'm an eternal optimist, and I was always so hoping that they may have been found alive, or somebody might have come forward and said, oh, hey, you know what, I think I might be Jane. But it never happened. But, we don't know what happened to them. There's still hope. They would be a lot older now. They'd be they're at that age to be having grandchildren of their own, hopefully. But, if they did in fact survive, I hope they're all doing well. I hope they weren't taken by somebody who abused them. But since there's been no trace, I think it's a pretty safe bet, unfortunately, that they are deceased. And as I said, that brings us to the end of today's case. If you have any theories or comments on today's case about the Beaumont children, or just do you remember them being used as an example for stranger danger when you were a child, or do you tell your children about them now? Just anything you might like to have a little conversation about today's case, please drop it in the comment section below, and I promise I will try to get back to as many of you lovely people as I can. And thank you all so much again for watching. I know this was a big one and quite a distressing case, so if you stuck with me right through to the end, I thank you so much. So please stay safe, everybody. Have a beautiful week, and I will see you back here soon. We do have a very special report coming up. I think it's going to be the next one we do for Missing Down Under, and it is to do with a case that is local to my area, and I will be working very closely on it with my best friend and my director-producer, Bianca Moroni. But I'm not going to tell you any more about it, because you're going to have to keep watching if you want to know what it is. Stay tuned. Keep watching, and thank you all so much for the ones who have subscribed and the ones that haven't. Please just hit the subscribe button. It takes you 5 minutes. It's for free, and you have no idea how much it helps me out here on YouTube. So thanks again, everybody, and please, for the love of God, stay safe. Keep your children close. Don't let them go to the beach on their own. At least send a babysitter you can trust, somebody with them, because these things are still happening today. Take care of yourselves. Be careful online, especially. That's just opened up a whole new can of worms for predators, their online presence. So just everybody, please stay safe. I'd love to see you all back here on my next videos. And we have more coming up. As I said, we have more Missing Down Under, more Real Crime Down Under, more Disasters Down Under, and more Oz Files. So please stay tuned for all of that. And keep your eyes peeled, because next month we are back with Clarence Valley Paranormal, and we are going to one... Oh my God, I'm so excited. It is such an active site. It has a horribly tragic story though, which I'm not excited about, but the site itself is going to be amazing, so please stay tuned for that. There'll be more details to come as we get closer to the investigation date. Anyway, that's it from me. Goodbye for now, and thank you all so much again. Bye.